Well, I'm up at the cemetery in Llanwonno, and it's a pleasant day. It's warm, not too windy, and I'm sitting on some of the seats, and I think there's nothing on them, but I think they must have been dedicated by someone to come up and talk or be with their loved ones. But it's a quite pleasant, and as I will say later on, when we get inside the church, this is a jewel in the crown. And if you look at it, it was just the centrepiece was the church, and then in the 1500s they done where the altar is, and later on the porch. So it's a progression, but the church itself has been here since 1093. It's beggars belief, isn't it? You know, you come out into the wilds in the middle of forestry, and what do you find? Outstanding. Now, there are 5 graves of war veterans that have died, and 2 of them were from the First World War, and the other 3 were from the Second World War. And the first 2 I have found out. I'm trying to find out some more. Were in the trenches, First World War, and then they got brought back and they went to a general hospital in a place called Chitton, because all general hospitals on the coastline in the First World War were emptied of civilians, and they were handed over basically as a general field hospital. Now, they died there, and what I don't understand is how they got brought all this way from Shorncliffe to the Bull, basically, or the cemetery here. One of them, from Shorncliffe up here, the use of the coffin car, the hearse, was £4, 9 shillings and 5 pence halfpenny. That was in real money, not the stuff we got today. Today it doesn't seem a lot of money, but in them days it could be something like 2 weeks' wages, and that didn't account for the headstone. Now, as a veteran that died with an injury while serving, the Imperial War Graves or the Commonwealth War Graves, they would set up a stone and they would buy the grave, and the grave is there in perpetuity. That's a big word, just instead of saying forever. So if you're going to say I'm here forever, you can say I'm here in perpetuity. Make you sound nice. But what we're going to do next now is I'm going to take a stroll up, and it will be a stroll, and we're going to go into the church, and we'll tell you a little bit about the church inside, okay? Got to thank the wardens. Got to thank them for giving up their time to come up and open St. Gwynnos for us, because without their cooperation we'd only be able to do this little bit. So if you'll come with me and we'll pop in and we'll sort the inside the church out. And then you can see why I say it's a jewel. Okay, right, we better be on our way then, okay? Well, I'd like to welcome you to St. Gwynnos. St. Gwynnos is a church that was built in 1093. It's on a hill and it's in a little, or was a little part of Llanwonno. The graves, and some of them are from the 6th century. In the 12th century, there was an extension put on. Basically, the part that I'm in now. In 1500s, there was a porch put on, which we'll see from the outside later. And since then, it has been used all the time by the residents of Andersable, Ferndale, that area. Now, an interesting point is, if you look at the other little bit snippets I've done, I've talked about Thomas Chester. Well, where I'm standing now, quite possibly the coffin of Thomas Chester could have been, because he was buried from this church. It's a jewel in a crown that's been lost. And I think that anybody that wants to visit something that hasn't changed, this is the place. If someone from 1500s come back and looked in this church, except for the lights and stuff like that, but basically it's the same. What we'll do in a second, we'll go around and I'll talk about the windows, because the stained glass windows we got here, they are, like me, ancient. And we just like to show you as much as possible so that you can get the feel of the place. Now, when you come to the church, just outside the cemetery, on my left as I'm talking, is a public house. It's called the Brynfanon. So you come up, you can have a look around the cemetery. You can arrange, and what we'll do, we'll put the contact number up later of someone, one of the wardens, so you can get in contact with to find out if the church will be open when you are visiting. Then you can go to the Brynfanon, have something to eat, make a day of it. But if you don't see this, this is one of the 7 wonders of Rhondda Cynon Taf. Right, what we'll do now, we'll start on the windows. Got to appreciate the times we're in, what is happening, and what we can and can't do. But foremost is the church. Now, if you look over my right shoulder, you can see 2 saints. The one On the left, as you look at it, is St. Stephen. And the one on the right is St. Alban. Now, these are two saints that's depicted in the church. And there's a lot more saints in here because the church is so old that records have been lost. A perfect example is the university in Aberystwyth asked for the grids of the cemetery to be sent to them so they could make copies and send a copy back and keep the original. When I inquired, they turned around and said the copies or the original never arrived. They got no record of it. So that is a part of history of this church that is lost forever. So by doing what we are doing now, we are hoping to maintain the history. Now you're talking about a glass window that's a couple of 100 years old. Just imagine the workmanship that has gone into it and the cost, because in them days a penny could have been a week's wages. And for them to get these windows done must have been a sacrifice in more than one way. Churches today not being used, not as much as they should be. Right, we're on the next window now, and this one is a 3-panel window showing Jesus rising from the tomb. On either side of Jesus, there are soldiers sleeping. They wouldn't have been sleeping in my regiment, I tell you that, but that's it. If ye that be risen with Christ, seek these things which are above. And it's dedicated in loving memory of Lewis Wayne Morgan, MD, verger, and his son, Lewis Watkins. Wayne Morgan, erected by his loving wife, Anne, and daughter, Margaret, Jane, and Catherine. Again, the cost in them days was really high, so they must have thought a lot of them. I still can't get over them soldiers sleeping, see. It's, they should be on guard, but never mind. Right, we've moved on to the next window. And this is St. Peter is depicted on the left panel and St. Paul in the right. And the writing on the top is, he sent them to heal the sick. And this is in loving memory of Richard Mathis, MA, MB of Rada, erected by his loving wife Margaret and daughter Rachel. We are now at window 5. Emmanuel, God with us. The centre panel depicts the Holy Family. The panel on the left depicts the shepherds, and in the background can be seen a church that certainly wouldn't fit the architecture of that time. The panel on the right depicts the 3 wise men. The depiction is incomplete, as all that remains of it in this centre panel, remembrance of our dear Father and this parish erected by. The window was smashed and broken and stole the original font from this church. And because of that, the depiction on the bottom has been eradicated. It's a shame that people can't respect. In this window, we have depicted the Good Samaritan, and he's in the left panel. The Samaritan is a parable of Luke, chapters 10, verses 30 to 37, who in contrast to the priest and Levite who passed by on the other side, tended the traveller, who had fallen among thieves on his way from Jerusalem to Jericho, and provided hospitality for him at an inn. The Good Shepherd is depicted in the panel on the right. In early Christian art, Christ was frequently represented as the Good Shepherd with the lamb upon his shoulders. This theme is also found in John chapter 10, verses 7 to 18, and the parable of the Good Shepherd, Luke chapter 15, verses 3 to 7. This window is St. Matthew and St. Mark, one of the two gospel windows. St. Matthew was one of Jesus' first apostles, who had been a collector of taxes for the Romans until Jesus changed his life. He alone tells us of the three magi who followed the star to a stable in Bethlehem and brought gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the infant Jesus. St. Mark was not one of Jesus' own disciples, but he wrote this gospel as told him of by St. Peter. Although it is in the second gospel in the New Testament, it is believed to have been first to be written. The meaning of the word gospel is good news. Now, these windows were not dedicated by anybody. They were dedicated by the parish, and they would have been bought by the congregation when they were in church. Now, this window depicts St. Lucas and St. Jonas, one of the two gospel windows. St. Luke wrote the third of the four gospels and also the Acts of the Apostles. St. Luke is the patron saint of artists and of doctors and surgeons. St. John is the disciple to whom Jesus entrusted his mother at the foot of the cross. John was also the author of the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible. And if you look to the left of the window, you'll see a dedication that was put there by my wife and myself in memory of Thomas Chester. And it depicts at the top, trapped like rats. The next one down would be the Glengarry cap badge of the 24th 2nd Battalion, the Warwickshire Regiment, because it didn't become the South Wales Borders until 1881. And below that, it's the Campaign Service Medal for South Africa, and some are dated 77, 78 and 79, and some are just 79. All depends on when the soldier went out there. Come now to the centre window. This depicts Jesus with a baby in his hand, and on the bottom it says, "Come unto me, all ye that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." 1876. So I'm assuming that is the earliest date that window could have been put in. But again, workmanship, experience It's quality. Right, it wouldn't be right for us to visit St Gwynnos up in this lovely part of the country without a visit to Griffiths Morgan, better known as Giton and Brantz. Now, he was a runner, and there's a couple of stories, and I'm only quoting what I've been told, right? Now, if Bill was here, he was around then, in 1737, and he could have told us something. He came in and he wanted a cup of tea, and they found out they had no milk. So his girlfriend put the kettle on, and he ran from here down to Mountain Ash and back with the milk before the kettle boiled. Now, you wouldn't have done it if it was an electric kettle, but when you look at a kettle, we think of a small kettle. In them days, it was on a big metal arm and swung over the fire, and the kettles were like cauldrons. So, yes, he could have done it because it would have taken about an hour for it to boil, but that's just me thinking about it. On another occasion, he was in for a bet about running against this other gentleman, and the distance that they run was 12 miles, which is half a marathon, and he'd done it in under 53 minutes. But the story goes that he was so far in front of this one that he was racing against, he stopped to talk to some of the people on the side, and they had a horse and cart in front of him to make sure that the road was clear so he could run down it. That would have been a sight, but he actually stopped in to talk to people that he knew, and then got carried on past the winning post. So he could have done it in a lot less time. And apparently on this occasion, his girlfriend came across and said well done and tapped him on the back, and his heart stopped, died instantly. Because when he used to run, after he ran a long distance or something like that, he'd come back and he'd lie in a load of fresh horse's dung, because he reckoned the heat from the dung helps to relax his muscles. I'm sorry, I'd be stiff for a week, but you wouldn't get me in that thing. But this is Gito, and you have a race every New Year's Eve, Nos Galon, and it's from here down to Mountain Ash. Now, there's always a mystery runner, and he starts the race. And no one knows who he is until the race is on. And what we're going to do, we'll leave old Gito now. He looks tired. We'll leave old Gito and we'll go across to the Bryn Ffynnon, which is the pub across the road. And on one of the walls, they got pictures of runners, or the mystery runners, from New Year's Eve on the wall. We'll ask the permission to take some photographs of it. If we don't show them, it's because they said no. But if we show them, they said yes. And if they say yes, I'll buy Richie a drink, a cheap one. where we'll have a look at the pictures of the people that run, and I'll guarantee you'll remember one or two of them. Right, we've been inside the church, and this is a notice board, and when we came out we noticed it. So as I was stating, you've got the Christian worship began here as far back as the 6th century, and its founder, St. Gwynno, is also commemorated in Llantrisant and Feina. The church at Llanwonno is a medieval building, difficult to date. Now, the church was restored in 1894, paid for by a Miss Oliver Talbot of Margam. The belfry and west doorway were added, as well as the large windows. Now, when we said about the windows in there, this gives us a date. Copies of the medieval stained glass window in Powys and the church is an ancient font and fragment of an early Celtic cross, which probably dates from the 7th or 8th century. The Cistercian Way, a long distance footpath around Wales which links the Cistercian historical sites of the Principality, run past this church. And that's a site because the pilgrims come here once a year, and what they meant to do is to visit each church on the Pilgrim's Way, and not 100% sure, but I think they try and head down to St. David's, the cathedral, and they have a church service there. But this Pilgrim's Way goes way, way, way back. So I'm glad we noticed this because it reinforces what I said inside. I hope you've enjoyed this little scurry about. Stay safe, stay indoors, and stay well. See you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.